Hello there, my name is Eric Savinsky.
I'm Todd Crawford.
We are too cool for the comic shop. And in this episode, we'll be talking about Blade Runner, specifically the original film, the book on which it is based, and the sequel, Blade Runner 2049.
All right, so just to start this off, uh, the book, of course, is written by Philip K. Dick. To be hysterical if I got that wrong after saying "of course," because that ran through my mind for a second. Like I'm
You called
looking
him a
at it.
dick? Oh my god.
There's an author. It's one of my favorite jokes to do in a bookstore. His name's I think it's Alan Moorcock, and I always point it out when I pass. I say, "Moorcock, no, thank you. I've had enough." And
Oh my god.
so that'll be the end of my stand-up routine for the episode. And
Yeah, I'm glad.
But no, the Philip K. Dick book, it's very enjoyable. It was summed up to me very well in college. After I read it, I was talking with a friend, and he said, "Well, Blade Runner is the greatest science fiction movie ever made, and the book is pretty good." And that's basically how I feel about it. Where I like it. I got nothing against it. No complaints. But it's not the best science fiction book ever written. It's a very good one, and for me, that's basically it.
And I honestly have not read the book. I'm sure I probably will someday, just to go back and explore the roots of it. I would probably read the book before I would, rewatch the movies or something. So it is it's good to know that it came from, a sovereign author and this one viewpoint, and then just to see it get expanded in the future.
Yeah, one thing that I will say that's interesting that really hasn't been addressed too much in the films, really at all, other than almost Easter eggs to that level of detail in the original film, is that, as I recall, the book focuses much more heavily on the different citizens on Earth being very obsessed with mechanical animals. The book was called "Do Androids Dream of Robot Sheep?" and and there's a big thing where the protagonist, I believe, he has a little sheep farm, and they're robot sheep, of course, and he's trying to upgrade his farm or whatever. Now, I mean, I get the exact animal right or all that, but there was a huge theme was how everybody's obsessed with animals and getting a nicer one, and it's pretty interesting stuff. I really love that brand of sci-fi, so I'm endeared to it.
Yeah, I do have to correct you though, Todd. The novel is called "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep," not robot sheep.
Oh shit, that's right. That's
We're keeping that in.
I
Commenters
was
have to vilify you.
no, it's funny you said that because I actually tricked you. I was testing you to make sure that you knew.
Well, hey, here's to subvert your expectations. I actually had just Googled that, and that's the only reason I know you're wrong.
And I actually I'm going to talk about the movie now because you were wrong about that. So we're going to move on.
Yeah, so I actually, you and I have different experiences with the Blade Runner movies because I watched Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049 pretty much like the same week for the first time each. I was late on the Blade Runner train. I watched it a few years ago. I believe it was December 2017 where I first watched Blade Runner. Really enjoyed it. And to be honest, all of the buzz and hype that the reception of Blade Runner 2049 got actually finally made me watch the original. And then I watched the sequel very shortly thereafter.
Yeah, and it will. And, we both, relatively speaking, got on Blade Runner very late, and that's not just being facetious, but because of our age, and that is very relevant for a film like Blade Runner because the film has one of those weird ones where it has many different cuts to it and many different versions. And it's one of the fascinating examples where it's one of the only movies, maybe the only movie I can think of, in which the director's cut is considered better than the theatrical cut, or the final cut, I guess it's officially called.
Yes. And I watched the um, cut of the film, like the I don't even know what it's called, director's cut, final cut, whatever. I believe whatever I watched was like cut that people, the fans like and suggest you watch.
Yeah, I have a box set with all of them, and I hate to say it because I always wanted to. Same with Dawn of the Dead. I have a fantastic box set with like six different versions of that movie. I think Blade Runner, there's like six versions, something insane like that. I've
That's
only
crazy.
seen the one that everybody likes best. I'm not gonna lie. I don't have time to watch like I watch these movies like once every 3 years or something. I don't have time to go through and compare and contrast each different iteration.
Right. I don't think I have any desire to do that because I did a good bit of research before I watched it because I realized there was multiple cuts and Ridley Scott director's cut, like that final cut is what he wanted the movie to be. So like in my opinion, it's and every director's cut is like that to an extent. Um, with a film as cerebral as the Blade Runner and how well acclaimed that cut of the movie is, I was like, okay, well that's basically a definitive for me. I'm just gonna watch that, and that's widely available to watch as well.
Yeah, I agree. I do have a minor qualm with it, and I didn't used to, but the older I get, the more I do. The shot of the horse running from that he took from his other film Legend and inserted it in, and also the implications. You know, it's funny. I used to be a defender of it. The implications that Deckard may or may not be a replicant, I actually think are so like superfluous to the other themes of the film, and don't it doesn't really matter ultimately whether or not Deckard is human, because to me the entire film is about how he's less human than these robots because of his lack of empathy, because of how disconnected he is from others.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, one of the most compelling things about Blade Runner to me, and sequel plays on it on the idea of it quite a bit, um, is that Deckard could be human or replicant, and that debate inherently ties into the themes of these two movies so well. And not getting a definitive answer is part of the charm for me because, I could believe one or the other. But the fact that that debate exists really plays into the themes of the franchise anyway.
Yeah, it's one that I was always a big supporter of. More recently, I've kind of turned on it and felt like, oh, do we really need that kind of ambiguity? Is it really necessary? Because I think the themes are stronger if it is known that he's human. But it's kind of I kind of like it either way. But to my understanding, the theatrical cut did not get into that at all, and there was infamously bad voiceover from Harrison Ford, who intentionally recorded it to be way too dry and monotonous, thinking they would never actually use it in the finalized film. So really interesting stuff, in my opinion, behind the scenes.
Yeah, because it's almost like I wish I could have experienced this movie in the theaters because it's just interesting. I wonder what audience they were going for because this is surely a lot more thematically rich, or at least on the surface, than say a Star Wars or whatever, and stuff that was coming out almost around the same time in sci-fi. So it's always interesting to me that I assume whatever they thought would work with audiences is part of the reason why there's so many damn cuts of this movie.
I think that could be the case, and to my understanding, and this definitely is not I say this with little confidence. It's been so long since I really was looking into the making of and the reception. And we're saying this movie really kind of was a bit of a flop and was kind of a cult hit that caught on later on, especially with the different cuts have kind of kept it alive with fans wanting more and to see Ridley Scott's final vision. Um,
Yeah,
it,
that's what it seems like. So maybe it wouldn't have been that crazy of a theater experience in 1982 or whatever, and to see the kind of trickle of fans actually growing over time. I mean, and that's the things that fascinates me about cult classic films. A film is really good to a lot of people if for some reason there's more fans of that film over time. And it's not like Blade Runner was like a sci-fi film that was getting merchandised out the ass. If it was, then maybe the following growing over time would make more sense. But I think more people were just attracted to the quality and the talent associated with it. more of Harrison Ford as the years go by. You watch more of Ridley Scott stuff as the years go by, and I think it was probably just a case of a lot of people going back to that over and over again.
Yeah, and you got to give Rutger Hauer a lot of credit as Roy Batty.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of talent associated with the movie. I was just really impressed with it when I first watched it a few years ago. It felt super visceral, super practical. Um, it's aged pretty well in terms of visuals, I think too. Not too many movies from the '80s can pull that off.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think personally this is my favorite Harrison Ford role, and I think that the movie and what's so fascinating by it is that it just immaculately blends the aesthetics of noir with that of science fiction.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. And because of that, I don't feel like any other sci-fi feels like Blade Runner, at least to my knowledge. There's some things that come close. The anime Psychopaths kind of rides the line, but it's anime instead. But there's not many things that I think can compare on a tonal level to Blade Runner.
And even when you look at the soundtrack, it's got one of the best soundtracks of all time. It's this kind of jazzy music, but then it's very like electric and synthetic, and just every moment of the film. And Ridley Scott, really, at the end of the day, he's a visual director. I don't want to say he's not a storyteller. I mean, here I'm calling this movie one of my top three science fiction films of all time, at least. Alien's great. He's done a lot of good movies, but where he really shines, in my opinion, is dealing with set design, dealing with atmosphere, dealing with just kind of ambiguity. And I think that this film's just the perfect piece for him to showcase his talents because the whole thing's really a mood piece. And it was just recently brought up to me this past week.
Yes.
It was recently brought up to me this past week that even the speech that Roy Batty gives in the end, like where he said, I saw ships and I saw all this stuff, and the moments were washed away like tears in the rain. Like it kind of sums the film so beautifully because it's a film of moments, and it's just about watching something, these images on the screen, and getting this emotional reaction from it, basically. I really think that the plot is just window dressing for atmosphere.
Yeah, no, I can agree with that. And when that's done well, some of my favorite movies and especially TV shows like that, where the mood is just so palpable. And I think Blade Runner is kind of a trailblazer for that type of storytelling in film because a lot of these kind of action oriented blockbuster movies. I don't know if you can consider Blade Runner a blockbuster. And he had a budget of like over 30 million, so probably. Um, a lot of those movies have very simple plots, especially back then. I think Blade Runner is one of the first films to challenge that notion and have a more it's spiritual might be a way to call it. 'Cause I agree. It's more about the mood and how you're feeling when you watch the movie.
Yeah, and that may sound like an insult or like I'm discrediting the plot of the story, and I'm not. It's just about being a little bit closer to what some people call pure cinema, or about just being about the filmmaking itself, the editing itself. And what I love about the film so much, and you see so rarely, is you see like smoke hanging in the air when somebody's smoking a cigarette. You see dust on surfaces. Like Earth, it's so interesting because Earth in this universe feels like it's like an abandoned place for the lower classes, but yet, so it's like foreign is decrepit state for what we recognize America as being, which just seems to be some vague reflection of. But yet, it's familiar. It's got this egregious capitalism, giant like Coca-Cola signs and humongous neon Tokyo, New York esque, um, just advertisements in the sky. And it's such a compelling environment. It's so lived in and crowded. It's so claustrophobic and yet ambient.
I agree. I agree. I mean, everything with the set design and the lighting and just everything visually paints a complete picture, which the best sci-fi does well. Um, a lot going on in Blade Runner. I mean, you compare it to like Tatooine in Star Wars. Even the most populated part of Tatooine is Mos Eisley Cantina and the town of Mos Eisley, and even that is kind of sparse. There's a lot of characters and aliens and whatever, and then the rest of the planet is desert, and you have moisture farms and all that. And Blade Runner, all those layers that you're talking about are just literally stacked on top of each other. So you pick out any one's establishing shot from Blade Runner, you're potentially going to see the lower class environment, upper class environment, the advertising and the marketing in this environment, the luminescence surrounding the more government run buildings and all that. You'll see all of that in one shot sometimes, and it's just kind of incredible.
Exactly, yeah. And it's interesting because like that, like you said with the different classes, you really get the feeling of overpopulation. You really get the dread of like some weird economic issue. I guess you could draw a parallel to what we're going through right now in America in some way or another. You really just it just I always go back to this as another movie, but George Lucas always filmed Star Wars as though it was a documentary and how he framed the shots, how he represented the worlds using just camera work. And in doing so, it made you feel as though it was a more lived in or more possible. You believe in that world more because he filmed it in a manner in which you would expect to see a documentary. And similarly,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that this film was filmed similarly, but you feel as though you're in this world. I mean, even I was listening to soundtrack this whole week, and without even watching the movie, I felt like I was a part of that universe just listening to sounds from the movie.
Yeah, it's absolutely immersive. I think Blade Runner is one of the more immersive movies I've ever watched. And I think that's a good way to describe it too. I only watched it full once. I mean, so these are all of my memories and things associated with it. Watching it once, I own it, and I gotta watch it again. It left an impact on me, and the memories of the story and the shots are so strong. After 3 years later, I watch potentially hundreds of movies a year. It stuck with me for a long time. That immersion is just on another level.
Another thing I want to point out is the Voight comp test scenes, how they find out if they're robots or not. I think of that so often with like you get like a certain kind of boss or something, someone who's just like so formal and expressionless. And I wish I had one of those machines, because I would bet most humans would fail it.
Yeah, I know, right? And I think that's the whole commentary on this franchise is losing humanity just on a societal level, but also on an individual level. And you see examples of that all throughout the movie. The the franchise is very thematically consistent. Every single scene or character decision plays into that mood and it plays into those themes. So it's hard not to like this movie. I mean, this is not the movie that you want to watch if you want to turn your brain off and see some sci-fi action. It's definitely not that movie. Um, for fans of the genre and the noir too, like yeah, I can't imagine people disliking this film.
No, I really, it's a funny thing because it's almost hard to talk about in the sense that it's just all positive, really. I really,
Too much.
like, I try to respect people's opinions or something, but like, I feel as though if I was talking to someone and they said that they didn't like Blade Runner, it would be as though they had just insulted my mother or something.
Right? Because it's so clearly um thought out, and like, what it would tell me is like, oh, you don't like the movies I like at all. Okay, cool, good to know.
So I would just, I would be at first be angry. I want to lash out, but then I had to get concerned. I'd be like, do you need help? You, are you on some kind of
Need help
medication you shouldn't
understanding the
be?
weight of this picture.
Yeah, is there something I could do for you? I mean, what's going on? I mean, for me, it's funny. Really, for me, there's like a holy trinity of science fiction movies. So it's the original Planet of the Apes, Blade Runner in 2001. And I really don't think this has really anything in common with Planet of the Apes. The sequel actually does have a bit in common with the recent Apes reboot trilogy, but we'll get to that later. Um,
Well, that's a future topic for sure.
yeah, and but the film Blade Runner to me is very similar in terms of science fiction's approach to it as 2001: A Space Odyssey. And I would say like if you don't like 2001: A Space Odyssey, then you probably won't like Blade Runner. You probably won't get the appeal. It's definitely faster paced than 2001. It's like twice as fast,
Yeah,
but
for
twice as
sure.
fast is still slow
That's one
motion.
of my that's one of my personal flaws or just personal preferences. 'Cause I actually think Space Odyssey is a good movie, but it's a movie like I will watch it once and I don't feel like I ever have to watch it again. Whereas I want to rewatch Blade Runner, I guess.
For me, both movies are like a once every 3 year kind of deal. And not to like put them
Hmm.
down, but what I love is like there's some movies that are so great you can watch them every day, and there's some movies that are so great you can watch them once a decade. And it's like it's like passionate love making with the film, and it just
Yeah,
fucking exhausts you and takes everything out of
exactly.
you. And I love both movies. I get why a lot of people don't like watching both these movies in some ways. Blade Runner
You
less
can have
so.
a quick with something like Star Wars. You can have a quick fling with Star Wars and then have that same fling next month, right?
Exactly, yeah. Um,
Because like you can enjoy those movies on different levels. You can enjoy them for spectacle only. You can enjoy them for the thematics only, or whatever. Blade Runner and 2001 and other movies like it, I feel like we're enjoying it because of this cohesive picture that it provides, and like there's really no other way to enjoy it, I guess. So because of that, because it's a little more um load bearing, there's more work involved. You can't rewatch that all the time.
yeah, another one I feel very similarly about is I call it Akira, but I don't know. I hear it's Akira, Akira. I think that actually has a lot in common with Blade Runner,
Yeah.
aesthetically
No.
especially.
Well, some people pronounce it Akira or Akira, or I don't know. I know which movie you're talking about.
Yeah, I called it Akira, and then someone corrected me like, actually it's Akira. And then I buy the movie on Blu-ray. I've seen it like 5 or 6 times at this point, and they say Akira in the movie, but then in the other dub that I had, they said Akira. And I'm like, I give up. I don't fucking. The movie doesn't even fucking know.
Yeah, right. I don't. I bet they'll get a Hollywood live action remake. I bet yes, it will. So maybe we'll get a more definitive, widely acknowledged pronunciation then.
Yeah, they'll probably just like Joe.
I hope it'd be cool to have like an anime movie adaptation that was actually really good. It's not impossible, but I don't know if that would ever happen.
Yeah, well, that one, without getting too far off topic, is I know Taika Waititi was attached to it, and I don't think that he has the directing capabilities remotely. And it's not even like an insult. His directing style is not suited for Akira. And if he was going
No,
to
I
grow
don't
to
think so
that
at all.
level, because I mean, we're talking about like basically the greatest looking anime of all time, at least debatably, but honestly, being debatably would almost be insulting to say to Akira because it's so far
Well, it's
ahead of the
also a
league.
fucking depressing movie too, and I don't think Taika is no, that's not really his material.
Exactly, yeah, it's just not like a good fit at all for me. Like, it's not impossible, but I would rather get like I forget his name right now, the dude who did Birdman and
Oh, Inaritu, I think his last name is.
Inarritu, yes, thank you. I think someone like
Yeah,
him and his style would be very well suited for that.
I think so. Yeah, I agree because he also did The Revenant, right?
Yes, The Revenant. I love both those movies.
I love The Revenant too. Maybe we'll have to talk about that sometime.
Yeah, so anyhow, Blade Runner. No,
Yeah. So,
oh
do you have
sorry.
anything else to say about the first film?
particularly for the first one, it's really hard. I'm trying to think of it. There's just so much. Thing like Daryl Hannah in the movie. I'm thinking about like the different shops that he goes into, and it's just it's really just this incredible, busy, oppressive, cold, and kind of beautiful world that it's not always pleasant to spend time in, but it's always so rewarding, and it does ask a lot out of you as a viewer. But I think it's one of the most rewarding cinematic experiences I've ever had.
Yeah, and I absolutely look forward to that, once every 3 years or whatever rewatch, like it's going to be an event. Like, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna sit down and watch this tonight," and, all of my attention will be focused on it.
It's a holiday. That's the only way I could describe it.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I also think, of that in the same regard for the sequel as well. Yeah, and I was surprised too because until just recently, you had kept telling me that you had shied away from watching Blade Runner 2049, um, for various reasons. So that actually kind of surprised me since you love the first film so much, but that also makes sense because, like Holy Ground.
Yeah, so I mean, I didn't want to watch the sequel because I heard that they cast a woman in it, and that really made me upset. No,
Todd.
my thing with the Blade Runner sequels is kind of antithetical to Blade Runner. Like, I'm a little open, I guess, to different films told in that world, but like, I don't watch Blade Runner and think what happens next, or at least I don't think that wanting an answer. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I feel like
no, I know what you mean.
the even though the film is mostly a mood piece, as I said earlier, it's the story's over as far as I'm concerned. It's kind of how I feel about Star Wars too, with Episode 7 when that came out. I was like, I mean, the planets and Star Wars are cool and stuff, but the story's over. I just don't know where you could possibly go that would be engaging from that point.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I always felt about Blade Runner. I was open to something like maybe an animated series you could do, like obviously more adult, um, something like that, or even something like just set in the same universe. You can even have a detective or something, but just completely its own thing.
That could be cool. I kind of want to see that. That'd be awesome, especially since so many anime, including Ghost in the Shell and Psychopaths and other things that I've watched, are actually pretty much based off of Blade Runner.
Exactly. That was my thought too. Or even like this isn't a great example. I mean, I hear these are good, I think, but Animatrix and how that did, I could see a similar approach being taken with Blade Runner.
True. Yeah, maybe it will someday.
Probably.
Yeah, so I'm curious, because we haven't talked about this before the podcast. So, what is your overall, thoughts on the quality of Blade Runner 2049 now that you have watched it?
It's a funny thing because there's a few different perspectives I have on it, and I don't think one necessarily trumps the other, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So a big thing for me going into it was there really was no reason for me to watch the movie. People were kind of mad at me because I watched the movie. You like Blade Runner? Why aren't you watching it? And I'm like, there's no appeal. There's nothing in this movie that makes me want to watch it. I love Ryan Gosling. I typically like the movies he's in.
Hmm.
I don't really care for Dennis Villeneuve's movies mostly. I like Prisoners. The other one
Yeah. See,
after that
whereas
was like
I'm a pretty big Denis Villeneuve fan. Yeah, his name is pronounced weird. Um,
yeah,
is
I'll
is really
try.
great. I know you try. I liked Arrival. I know some people don't like Arrival, but I feel like he's got a cool style about him. So I was
Well,
down
yeah,
with
visually
his
he's a good director.
recommendation.
I think for me he's just, and this is most directors. I think his visual style is fine. It's just that I think he's only as good as his scripts, and I don't think that all those scripts have necessarily supported um, that style or really I've enjoyed. Like I really liked Prisoners and
Okay.
Sicario, it was called. That's a good movie. I got nothing
I
against
haven't
that
watched that
movie.
one actually.
For me like Prisoners I could watch every few years. Sicario I watched once and was like, okay, cool. I like that. And that's basically it. You know what I mean? Nothing against it.
I feel that
Arrival,
way about Prisoners. Prisoners was the first movie of his that I ever watched, so I feel like that's one of the better uh, crime thrillers, I guess, of the 2010s.
Yeah, yeah, that's just a fun David Fincher-esque movie. Um,
Yeah.
Arrival really kind of put me off. I really wasn't on board for that. It was one where a movie review really convinced me. It was a weird thing where I didn't know how I felt about it, and I watched a movie review. And it's one of the few times where the review actually just like totally changed my mind on the whole movie, and was like, okay, I was on the fence and had conflicting thoughts, and you just pushed me straight into negative. You persuaded me, which doesn't happen too often. So I guess that's unique.
Too malleable, Todd.
I think so. I am pretty impressionable.
Yeah,
So
but yeah,
like,
he doesn't have a too many films to his name. He's going to be in charge of the Dune adaptation this year, which I'm
oh
pretty excited about because I've actually never dived into that universe at all. So I guess it'll be a good introduction for me.
yeah, I've never read Dune. It's on my bucket list. I
Hmm.
refuse to watch the movies until I read it, just because it just seems proper. And the original movie,
Yeah,
the only one that's I've known it for a very long time, is basically a famous train wreck. But the documentary
yeah.
Jodorowsky's Dune, based around one of my favorite directors, top five directors probably, Alejandro Jodorowsky, is really interesting stuff. It's a very fun little behind the scenes documentary on how this film was almost made and how it was would have changed cinema forever in this masterpiece. It never would have gotten made. It was way too expensive and ambitious, totally unfeasible. But the ideas for this movie that was never made basically created Hollywood science fiction imagery as we know it up until this day, essentially. It's still kind of passed around the storyboards like these hidden scrolls and stuff like Alien, H.R. Giger's artwork, probably Blade Runner, have designs basically straight lifted from that Dune film that almost was.
Well, that's too bad. Makes me feel sad that we didn't get it.
Yeah, I mean it's the kind of thing where it's like no amount of money on earth could have afforded to make that movie. It was a fantasy. It's a beautiful dream, but it's like peace on earth.
And maybe we'll get something close now because I think they're splitting it up into two movies instead of just one. And considering how long the novel is, that's probably a good idea.
Yeah, I know very, very little about it. I know it's like a 900 plus page book. It's
That's pretty
probably a
thick.
good idea.
Anyway, we are off topic now. You still haven't told me what your thoughts on the movie is, Todd.
Oh yeah, so my thoughts are like I said, I'm of two hearts with it. So I'm of my own, and then it's like if I was a professional critic writing a review. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So of my own, I really didn't like the movie at all. Um, it just didn't. It was kind of like homework or something. Like I was never invested. I was never really engaged. There's no emotional resonance, and everything that and this is the thing, and this is what I hesitate to say because I don't want to connect with the original film. I want to watch it on its own merits.
Hmm.
And it had nothing in it that made the original appealing to me at all. So even though it has the title and it's its own thing, which is good, and I have positive things to say about it. I'm not saying it's an F. I'm not trying to be that way. But just my personal
Hmm.
taste in film and my interests, it didn't do it for me even remotely. But so for instance, like the clutteredness of the original Blade Runner, the smoke in the air, the noir feeling, um, the grittiness is now entirely gone. It's like that Scooby Doo. I didn't see the movie, but the new Scooby Doo. There's a they were taking on a spaceship and they're like talking about how it's brightly lit and all that, and minimalistic and empty. And there's a joke about it being like an IKEA. And I felt like that was like most of the sets in the movie, which is stark contrast to the original. And in some
Yeah.
ways that makes sense, like K/Joe's apartment. Well, yes, that would be very clean because he is not human, so it makes sense. And he has this fake bride. A very interesting Bride of Frankenstein parallels. Did you pick up on that?
I've never watched Bride of Frankenstein, so no. But
I'll
is
extrapolate
it?
if that's okay.
Yeah. Is it kind of like because they acknowledge that there's this basically artificial love interest, and they there's a two-way knowledge of that being the case. but they just go along with it anyway, which I thought was one of the cool new elements of the universe being explored because I don't think there's anything like that in the original.
Yeah, so for with Bride of Frankenstein, there's a K. Joe thing, but specifically, and I feel bad giving away this like 100-year-old movie, but at the end of Bride of Frankenstein, they make the bride, and she sees Frankenstein, and she shrieks in horror, and then they're both essentially killed as a result of this abomination that's been created. She rejects him, is essentially the emotional turning point of the film, and basically the final twist of the film, which I think is very effective. And in this, there's a scene specifically where they present Harrison Ford's character Deckard with Rachel, who was the replicant that he falls in love with from the original film, of course.
Hmm.
And she's created as a Frankenstein monster, all that essentially. And I don't know how similar the shots were, but it definitely felt so intentional, especially with the tables turning, where instead of her rejecting him, sh- she is desperately seeking his approval, like Frankenstein was with the bride, and he rejects her, which was just
Hmm.
a neat little cinematic parallel that I picked up on that I probably entirely just made up through sheer stretch, like Long Cat.
It's very interesting. I guess I could talk about some of the things that I like about this movie, and I agree the set design is probably stronger in the original, and there are certain elements that I think are stronger in the original. I think the mood of the original is stronger. Obviously, the identity is stronger in the original. I mean, this is a sequel decades later. Um, like you were hinting at, I really appreciated that this was a very different movie. I mean, they are it's a sequel. In the same vein, it's kind of like Star Wars, where it feels very different. I mean, the sequel trilogy, for what it's worth, and people may love it or hate it, I definitely didn't feel like the original trilogy, at least to me, because even just there being a multiple decades gap in filmmaking. So I think that's inherently kind of interesting, unless something is a straight off rip off or reboot, which this wasn't. I was just really attached to the story. It kind of meanders a little bit in the beginning. Honestly, for the first 40 or 50 minutes of this movie, you're kind of like, sure where we're going. Really started to feel the protagonist in the middle of the film. Just the whole narrative of thinking that you're the chosen one, then realizing that you're not, but still trying to do your best and deciding to be selfless and to help these other characters reach the chosen one, which is their daughter and Deckard's daughter. Um, I thought that that was a hopeful message, which really contrasts how drab and shitty uh, the universe is in the sequel.
Yeah, well, that's what I was hinting at earlier, the Planet of the Apes parallel. And I think this film actually probably does it better than the Planet of the Apes trilogy because, and that's something I could get into some other video, but even though I love the Planet of the Apes trilogy, I think they often sacrifice the storytelling and character development for these ham-fisted biblical allegories. Um, in particular, one of the most egregious examples of it that pissed me off in the series is the reference to Moses not entering the promised land, and that's basically what the series ends on. And this film does basically that with Joe, where he goes on this journey, you witness his hero's journey and this emotional arc that he has, and then at the end he cannot enter the promised land himself. He dies on his
Yeah.
doorstep.
Which I thought that was it was beautiful though, because like Joe's character seems to be at peace with it, and that last basic movement of the movie, with him in the snow on those steps, just full of serenity, which is very much not vibe you usually get from Blade Runner. It was almost like a kind of a another drops in the rain moment for me. And again, I watched Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049 the same week, so I didn't have any like nostalgic attachment to the original that you did. So that might be part of the reason why I'm pretty even split on the movies, and I think they're both super high quality. And like my opinions on them are basically like I like them. I don't have different opinions as a fan or a critic, I guess.
Yeah, and really, I don't know, my opinion on it as a critic would change too drastically as a fan, other than a big thing for me is it just so it's like somebody recommends a band to you, and you're like, oh, I don't know, I'm not really into that kind of thing, and then they recommend it, and then you listen to it, and you're like, not really my kind of thing still. And that's very much, my thoughts as a fan versus as a critic, if that makes sense. Um, to get a little more in depth, you brought up
Like a
the
music
difference.
genre that you don't like, it's like you can still appreciate its technical prowess or something, but it may not be for you. It's potentially
Yeah.
like that.
So to state a positive, for instance, the technology used in the film, I thought it was clever. I thought that was well done. Like the memory viewing machine looks like what you would look through the eye doctor. I thought was a clever little thing there. The mechanics of
I like that
Joy
as well.
at home, how it does it has this weird mechanical system overhead, almost like a fan that allows her to project, and it's like an overhead projector that casts her down. I gotta say, I wasn't. I always saw this on forums. Everybody was like, like over the moon that the character's named after jerk off instructions, and it was something I wasn't even gonna bring up in this review, but I think it's so relevant because I wonder how much of the appeal of this particular movie is due to its themes, and it's basically appeal just to, like, and I hate using this term, I never do it. This is it's an example where it makes sense to, like the quote unquote incel audience, I think, or the disenfranchised males.
I don't know. Because I know people would like to draw a lot of parallels to specifically franchises that they've grown up with, and seeing it as an escape or as a pot shot against that particular type of group. I don't know if
Oh
any
no, I'm
directors
sorry.
or
Maybe I misphrased that. What I mean is that I think it like appealed to that group, and in ways that a lot of movies typically would not, in terms
yeah,
of
I mean I could see that.
the Ryan Gosling self-insert character, like you said, the theme of thinking you're the chosen one and not being that, and joy and all that. It seems like it really hit it off with them, kind of similar to like the Joker movie. It was a very
Yeah, I
similar
can
kind
see
of thing,
that.
and they're very passionate fan group in those circles, it seems.
It's funny though when people say that though, because then you look at the endings of these types of movies like 2049 and Joker, then they don't play into that fantasy because in Blade Runner 2049, um, Ryan Gosling's Joe character accepts that he's basically not, in that fantasy and lets the other characters have their day. And then in Joker, I mean, it's a cautionary tale. Oh, oh, it's not like celebrating that concept. I can see why, movies appeal to that audience originally when they begin, but how those movies end kind of detract from that too.
I agree, especially no, not to get into big political implications. I don't think Hollywood spent a movie or thousands of dollars or millions, I should say, obviously many millions, making a movie for some fringe group of internet nerd, you know,
No,
who's
I
very
agree.
vocal. I don't think that was a
I can see
target
why people
audience,
interpret it.
but I think it resonated with them, I should say, is my
Yeah,
point. Because, like you said,
I,
Joe joining the revolution for the new female leader, I believe in an election year when this came out, in which there's Hillary Clinton with a big push for that, wouldn't.
the year after this was a 2017 film.
Oh, okay. So yeah, like I don't think that's going to appeal to them. The twists and
It
turns
was
it
in
takes.
production the year that happened though, so you're pretty close.
And that's another thing I want to bring up in the movie that I liked was the girl who creates the replicant's memories. I think that's an interesting character. I think that she was the most interesting character in the whole movie, actually, and was really the only one that I had much investment in, including Deckard.
Hmm. No, it's almost like I wish she was in the movie more. I mean, I understand considering the plot why she's not, but yeah, I totally agree. It's a very interesting concept and an interesting character.
Yeah, that was one of the scenes in it where I was actually like, my ears kind of perked to what I was watching, and when she was describing
Mm.
it, and like I said, the technology of how she looks into his dream and how it's demonstrated, I thought was very engaging and interesting. It was almost like something out of Twilight Zone. It kind of reminded me of.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's you say Twilight Zone, it's almost like Blade Runner the original is a very strong kind of like dystopian mood piece. This Blade Runner 2049, at least a lot of the times, the memories that stick out the most to me from the sequel are more Twilight Zone-esque. The imagery is more existential and barren and wondering. I think of the scene where he's walking through like the red dust to the hotel, or the scene towards the end of the movie where they're just fighting at the edge of the ocean, or the just blinding yellow luminescence of Jared Leto's character's his palace. Like those are the images that stick with me 3 years later. So it gives me a different mood than the original does.
It definitely does, and I think that's a big reason it didn't resonate with me personally because it was so stark in contrast with certain things. So like it was always like an immaculate, wide open, minimalist interior, or it was just like this blue or yellow orange shithole. And it kind of gets into really the older I get, the more I fetishize shot on film movies, where like it's
Hmm.
almost like you see like a woman wearing stockings, and you're just like, oh my god, like that's not what I do, but like a man who does do that. Um,
Hmm.
and that's how I am with film sometimes. Like I see the grain, and I'm just like biting my lip as I'm watching the movie. And I love digital too. I'm a huge fan of a lot of digital productions. Nicholas Winding Refn, for example, using the Ryan Gosling career, I really like as well. And one of the big things for me, and I have this issue with a lot of modern movies, especially movies directed at males, men, action movies, I notice have this, the stylized ones. There's really only two colors typically. There's a blue and orange, and they do this in film because those are the
Yeah.
most easily contrasted colors, I believe. But I hear red and green are as well. I don't quite know how that's calculated anymore. It's been
I
a
mean,
long time.
technically, if you're talking the color wheel, it's blue and orange, red and green, and yellow and purple. Yellow and purple like never get used for some reason. I feel like that's an underrated color combination. But the blue and orange problem, as I like to call it, the thing not only in cinematography, but especially in movie posters. And I just looked
Oh
up the
yeah.
movie poster for Blade Runner 2049, and it totally commits cardinal sin of like blue and orange problem. Like it's kind of funny, honestly.
And that gets into nitpick territory. I'm not even saying it isn't.
For
Like
sure, for sure. It's just funny to talk about for me because like weird.
it's something I notice really bad when I'm watching a movie. I hate this. It's like some people found footage they can't watch it. For me, movies with
Hmm.
like blue and then just like orange like that, it's kind of the same feel. Um,
Yeah, I agree.
especially
Something that I do like about it, mood wise, is the soundtrack of this movie. But it's a Hans Zimmer soundtrack, so it's like no surprise that it's really good. But there are a few songs that really stick out in my memory from 2049. That's pretty impressive since it was a long time ago.
that is interesting. I only saw it once. And that was this past week. I remember it just being kind of like ambient hums and stuff. It reminded me, as I recall watching, and this isn't in the notes I took, so I hope this is accurate. Kind of like a Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross score, particularly for a movie like Gone Girl, or not Gone Girl. Yeah, yeah, Gone Girl. I'm sorry, that is right. That particular soundtrack
Yeah,
for
no,
me.
Trent Reznor did Gone Girl. Yeah, I know. It's funny that you mentioned that because memory was wrong. I thought this was a Trent Reznor soundtrack because it sounds similar, but no, it's a Hans Zimmer soundtrack, and he just leaned more heavily into synths and other shit.
Yeah, no, if you told me it was Trent Reznor, I really wouldn't be shocked. Um, One thing I got to bring up for me, and this was kind of when the movie was a turning point for me, where you kind of settle more into an opinion, was when Deckard first shows up. So first off, I'll get into actually some. I don't know if it's not positive or negative. It's just something I noticed that's curious that I'd like to address with the film's themes. is that I think the original film is much more existential in the sense that it's about what is a soul, what is existence, what is consciousness. And
Yeah,
this one has an interesting take on that, where really the defining mechanism of autonomy is very atheistic and not necessarily invalid though. So, for instance, I mean, what defines something, or what really is the crux of all this, is that one gives live birth to another replicant, and
yeah.
it
No, they definitely work with that. You know, it's like that one plot element drives the themes and the crisis of the sequel, whereas like there in the original there wasn't like one plot revelation that drove the whole movie. So this movie is definitely different in that regard.
yeah, it's just a philosophically different approach to the same themes,
Mm.
and that's fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that at all. I'd rather get that than just the same thing over again, of course.
Well, for sure. Yeah, totally.
Um, so going from that is a good way in which they demonstrate it is when Joe asks if the dog is real to Harrison Ford, and he says, "You ask him." And I thought that was a good interaction that really reinforces that theme cleverly.
Yeah, it does. And I don't know. It's like this movie has a lot going on, but it's just it's all in service of the same theme and a lot of stuff that we've already talked about. So it's hard to know, what else to say about the sequel too.
One thing I have to say about it is, and I apologize, I'm losing my voice here. I've been losing it all week. Is that the scene in which, and this is really probably, I don't know, one of the scenes in it where like it's more so than being disengaged, or where I had like a strong emotional reaction to. There was on the positive end of the spectrum, there was the Dreamweaver girl. Really cool stuff. Love the concept. That actress is great. I don't think I've ever seen her before. Pretty much everything about that was really cool.
Hmm.
The other one's kind of a silly one that just made me laugh. When Harrison Ford shows up and he starts punching Ryan Gosling repeatedly, is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen in a movie that's played so straight. And then you have this decrepit old Han Solo just punching Driver in the face multiple times.
Yeah, no, that whole scene where they fight kind of like the nightclub bar, whatever decrepit uh
Yeah,
casino plot is just a weird sequence entirely, and I feel like it's just kind of like partially comedic catharsis before the rest of the movie is super serious again. I guess they just had to like get that in there, to
do,
like refresh your palate or something.
do you, do you think that I made a joke during the movie because Harrison Ford's he's taken out pretty quick when there's a raid in the casino. He's incapacitated and knocked out in a car. And I made a joke that he was originally supposed to be in the whole fight, but old man Harrison had to take a nap when they were filming, so they just wrote it into the script.
No, that wouldn't be the first time they've changed the script of a movie because Harrison Ford had some sort of thing that he had to do.
Do you think the climax was kind of tongue in cheek? I know it's a weird thing to imply, but like with Joe choking the main antagonist girl, and I thought she's a really good actress. I actually made specific note to bring that up.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like
It's silly.
their their fight choreography. There aren't a whole lot of fights in. So when they are basically going all out at each other, um, you feel the ferocity of it, but it's almost so different from anything you've gotten so far. It's like, huh, it's kind of interesting.
But yeah, and I'm particularly referring to when they're inside the ship and it's filled with water, and he's holding her
Okay, so
underwater
yeah, when
while
he's
he's
choking her underwater. Yeah.
yeah. And once again, I'm also the film leans into the incel audience because the happy resolution the climax is choking a woman to death.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, I suppose so. Um, I just see that's the thing though. It's like, well, you know, if we want more badass women antagonists, then some of them are bound to blow up or get choked or something, right? So that's just
Yeah,
equal rights, right?
I'm not going to answer that. I feel like I'm being set up.
I don't know what the correct answer is, man.
No, no, it was like that aside. Like when she was first revealed to be the villain, I wasn't really totally on board. Not like I wasn't like I had an issue with it, but then like as it went on, particularly when she takes out Joe's boss, just her facial acting and like you said, ferocious is a good way to put it. Like actually like
Yeah,
intimidating, like oh this is a crazy bitch. Like I wouldn't want her in my office, you know.
yeah.
Like,
Pretty much, the movie takes a hard turn into crazy bitch in that scene where she takes out the chief.
I'm so happy she didn't throw the police chief out the window. Cause like I saw it coming. Cause like I think there's an exterior shot showing the window, and it goes inside, and she's gonna get killed. You know it's gonna happen. Like God damn, if she gets thrown out the window, they do a slow motion shot of her falling with glass, like this stupid like a Zack Snyder Watchmen esque shot. It's gonna be so cringe. I'm so happy they didn't do that.
They definitely exercised some restraint there. I'm glad they did too.
I don't know why I thought they would, cause that would be the most ridiculous like tone deaf thing ever. But I was worried
I
it might
think maybe
happen.
I think maybe deep down, Todd, that's what you wanted to
That could have been. Yeah, that happened, and then
happen.
like I don't know, Cry Little Sister starts playing or some random '80s track.
Yeah. Oh my god, I can see it now.
Yeah,
It
now I
would
want
it
it to
would just turn
happen.
into a Snyder movie at that point.
So I think for this movie, that's about all that I've got for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Still think it's a really good movie. I basically think the original is a bit better. Even just critically, technically, if I didn't have an affinity for either, which I really don't, because again, I had an experience where I basically watched both in the same month. But I would, I would always want, for me personally, to watch 2049 following the original, especially since like the next time I watch it, I'll probably watch it with Colton, and it will be like two new experiences to him as well. So yeah, I like it because it is different. It has its own identity while still connecting to the legacy of the other one. So I mean, if you're into that and the connective tissue of like decade later sequels, which some people are, then you have that. But if you're into these films being solitary experiences, you pretty much have that too.
Oh, airport. Hey y'all. It's not because of what you're saying, but because it's 2 in the morning. Um. Yeah. No. I definitely get what you mean, and I think a lot of my thoughts on 2049 are that it played to a different audience than the original, and
Mm.
I'm just not a part of that audience that one was made for.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. But hey, at least we get some good actors out of it. Like you said, I'm a big Ryan Gosling fan. Is Ryan Gosling like the Harrison Ford of our time? Is that where we're at?
I would definitely
Do you
say
think?
so.
Because I feel like he is like sometimes he's the everyman, and he's like kind of more of the reclusive, charming type, and not like the outwardly charming Robert Downey Jr., Leonardo DiCaprio, whatever, right? So I feel like he kind of is.
Yeah, well, and one of the things I love about him too is that he has range, and people always like to pretend like he doesn't. Especially, and it sucks when this movie came out. I don't blame this movie for it necessarily, but Gosling was right off the heels of two what Refn movies, where you first had Drive, and when she was a silent, brooding type, and then you had Only God Forgives, and when she was the ultra silent, ultra brooding type. And I love both those movies. But then
Yeah,
this
I
one
like Drive a
came.
lot. I haven't seen the other one, but I have seen Drive.
Only God Forgives is very, very polarizing. You either love it or hate it. I particularly love it, and he Ref made it.
Usually with love it or hate it movies, I love them, so I'm interested.
It's he did a show. The director did a show at the Amazon Prime this past year called Too Old to Die Young. Had Miles Teller and Jenna Malone in it, and it's the best thing that director ever did. Every episode except for the last is feature length, So it's like 8 hour and a half episodes and then like a half hour long episode. But like episodes like 3 and 4, they're each an hour and a half long each. They're a movie. It's the best shit he ever did. It was amazing.
Interesting.
So anyhow, so yeah, you have that kind of Gosling. Then you have like the blockbuster Gosling with like The Notebook. I don't know what the movie's called. Steve Carell and one of the best actresses of all time, whose name I unfortunately forget right now, the redhead from Kingsman 2 and
Oh yeah, I don't know.
Magnolia. I gotta
Uh, La La Land.
yeah. La La Land's a good kind of in between actually with him, where
Yeah,
he's kind of just playing it straight, but he's also
it's
uh,
also a musical, so a little more extraneous than normal.
Julianne Moore. I feel
Oh
so bad I
yeah,
forgot
that's
her
right.
name. She's one of my favorites. So yeah, my two favorites Gosling performances are a Blue Valentine, in which he plays a younger man who's very optimistic, and then kind of a jaded father later on down the road. That's my favorite personally. But then also the film, which is lesser known, and it was from the directors of Captain Marvel, so this is relevant for comic book talk shop, and it's called Half Nelson, a very low budget film, really really well made. His performance is just incredible, and those two performances are just two of the most influential and inspiring for me when I'm creating a character. I think about those two guys that he portrays all the time in those movies.
It definitely sounds like I have some more Gosling movies to watch.
You can never see enough.
Yeah. Sweet. Well, now that we're nearing the end of this podcast, I'm gonna go listen to the 20th song on the Blade Runner 2049 soundtrack. It's called Seawall. It's the really pulse pounding, throbbing song that plays when Poe is chasing the villain. Go save Harrison Ford. It is the best shit. It gets my blood pumping. I guess it's gonna be an all nighter for me.
I'm going to listen to. I'm going to go see If I Dream of Electric Sheep.
Oh yeah, well don't get buzzed.
I'm Todd Crawford,
And I'm Eric Zavinsky.
and we're too cool for the comic show.